Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gora Bhakta Vrinda Sham Vishnupad Param Sivraj Kachara Shrotar Shata Svangre Sabhaya Charinda Bhaktivedanta Samvishra Prabhupada Ki Cha Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Cha Shri Caitanya Caritamrta Ki Cha Nityakora Premanande Hari Hari Bhava Om Janam Tinim Dasya Granam Shana Shalakya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Garamayam Daratu Sapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uttaparakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrachatam Sahaganara Kunatan Vitam Tam Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sute Devi Pranamame Hari Priya Vancha Kalpadurubhishcha Kripa Sindhubhe Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhya Vaishnavibhya Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, welcome. We're continuing Sri Caitanya Caritamrta in Madhya Lila chapter 22, the process of devotional service. So we have been hearing Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally instructing Srila Sanatana Goswami, one of the two chief of the 6 Goswamis, the eldest one, and so we heard in the previous chapters how first he describes Sambandha Gyan in the previous chapter, obviously how we are related to Lord Krishna as his parts and parcels and the greatness of Krishna. And so understanding that, then we understand that our constitutional position is to serve him, and so that's how to do that, that's this current chapter now, the process of devotional service. So can you turn up the volume a bit? Okay. And so we heard a list of different items that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling Sanatana Goswami of what such a devotee is supposed to do in his process of worshipping the Lord. And we stopped with, I think, text 126, yes, about to attend the festivals like Janmastami and Ram Navami. So we'll continue text 127. So item number 34. One should surrender to Krishna in all respects. 35. One should observe particular vows like Kartik Vrata. These are some of the 64 important items of devotional service. Okay, so one should surrender to Krishna in all respects. That Mahaprabhu actually previously, I think Kamsar Senabur was speaking on that a few weeks ago, which Rupa Goswami then himself is explaining in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, obviously, the process of surrender, how to surrender to Krishna in all respects. In how does it go? To accept only what is favorable and reject that which is unfavorable to our devotional service, and what else is there? To know Rakshishya Vishwaso, to have full faith that Krishna will always protect us, and Gupta Tevaranam Tata, to know Krishna as our maintainer, our master, and to humility and full self-surrender. So those are the 6 items that Rupa Goswami is listing, how to fully surrender to Krishna in all respects. And if you do that in all respects, like in Sanskrit usually used for that is sarva bhavina, here we hear sarvata in all respects similarly. So Krishna, for example, he explains also in Bhagavad Gita, in 15th chapter, Purushottam Yoga, he is explaining how the first several verses on anatta nivritti, how understanding the material world as a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. He gives the analogy of the banyan tree reflected on the water, and how the different parts of the tree can be related to different parts of the material universe, or universe, and also in terms of, specifically for the conditioned soul, the material desires, and all of that, how one gets entangled, and how that is so much so that you can't actually see the banyan tree as a conditioned soul. You can't actually understand how you're being entangled, and how the material world is even working really, what to speak of understanding the spiritual world. So that's why Krishna is explaining that very nicely there, because first we need to understand that, how our position is now, how we entangle in this material world, and then he concludes that with, for example, then with Niramana Moha and Chitta Sangha Dosha, how if you're free of pride, if you're actually intelligent, then you are humbled by understanding how you're entangled, and then you will surrender to Krishna. So Niramana Moha Chitta Sangha Dosha Tyatmanitya Vinivritta Kama Titvan Prabhimukta Sukha Samnyara Gachanti Mudaha Padamavyayam Tat. So those who are amuda, who are not foolish, who are not befooled by the illusory energy of the Lord, they can go back to the spiritual world. How? By Nirmana Moha Chitta Sangha Dosha, by being free of pride, being free of false association, and then Adhyatma Nityaha, so they develop real knowledge about the self, and Adhyatma Nityaha Vinivritta Kamaha, so therefore they know that any endeavors here in this material world are useless, they only bring us more trouble, and so they give that up completely, and thus they are free from the dualities, Didvantvar Vimukta Sukha Dukkha Samya, happiness and distress on the material platform. And in that way, they are able to go back to the Supreme Abode. So then Krishna describes that, how that is like, that this abode is, if you reach that, then you'll never go back. Anyway, so I shouldn't talk now about the whole 15th chapter. But, so, and after describing that, Yat Katvani Nadi Vartante, then Krishna explains how to give us more impetus to really engage simply in devotional service and give up material endeavors. Then he explains further how he is the maintainer in all respects. For example, as through the moon giving, like in this morning we mentioned the moon god being the king of the trees, that it is through the moon that the vegetables get succulent, and so that we get really nourishment for this material body. And then Krishna himself is also the digestive fire and so forth. And yeah, so like that he's explaining nicely in the 15th chapter, Purushottam Yoga, and then he concludes with how someone, actually I try to remember, yeah, someone who then in that way really understands Krishna, then he knows everything. And so there he uses that word also in all respects. So try to remember the verse. I forgot the first line, but Sarva Bhavana Bharata is the second line, that one who knows me in all respects. Rather one who engages in full devotion service in all respects, Sarva Bhavana, with putting his full emotions simply in to try to please Krishna. Then he is Sarvavid, can't remember the full words, but then he is the knower of everything, and because understanding Krishna, then one understands everything, because Krishna is the root of everything, and so similarly, we should surrender to Krishna in all respects, then our life becomes fully perfect, which we hear here by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then, let's continue text 128. So, one should associate with devotees, chant the holy name of the Lord, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, recite at Mathura, and worship the deity with faith and veneration. So, now, which Mahaprabhu then further explains in the following texts, that these are out of these many items that he already had listed, these are the most important ones. And again, like last week, I mentioned how so many, almost all of those items which we had discussed, you can actually very easily do if you come to the temple. And similarly, these as well, which are, but I'll, let's briefly discuss about it, and then we'll continue. So, associated with devotees here, we know, obviously, that is perhaps the most important of all those items, that only by association of devotees we, in the first place, are able to get the seed of devotional service, and then we will be able to engage in devotional service. I'm not sure if that verse came already, but it's somewhere in Caitanya Caritamrta also, that even at the highest stage of love of Godhead, still it is most essential association with devotees. I think just some verses before in this chapter also Mahaprabhu mentioned that. And chanting the holy name of the Lord, of course, we know that's especially now the Yuga Dharma, how the Lord makes himself particularly accessible in a very simple way, to at any time, any place, without restrictions, we can directly be with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in person, simply by chanting His holy name. And to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, Mahaprabhu, he would many times stress that importance, and he would show how pleased he is with devotees who do that. Like Gadadhara Pandit, obviously, he would hear from him always Srimad Bhagavatam, and there's other devotees also whom Mahaprabhu meets. I remember there's one devotee, I don't remember what his name was previously, but when Mahaprabhu saw how sincerely he was absorbed in reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and explaining it to others, he awarded him the name, I think, Bhagavatacharya, like being an acharya of Bhagavatam. So, yeah, and that's why Prabhupada obviously set up that every morning we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam. We have Srimad Bhagavatam class for 1 hour at concluding the morning program. And yeah, obviously we know, for example, that other than the holy name, being here now in Kali Yuga, there's having special importance also Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna himself, or no, rather I think it is the sages who explain at the beginning of Bhagavatam how that's one of the answer to those 6 questions the sages have at Naimisharanya of what will happen when Krishna leaves, where will Dharma be. Then explain Krishna Swadhamma, what do you call? I forgot. Where it's explained that when Krishna disappeared from this world, also Dharma and Jnana, I think, went along, left also, but he does enlighten the world through this Srimad Bhagavatam, through Puranarko Dunoditaha. So that's the sun that has arisen after Krishna's disappearance in himself as the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so next item, residing at Mathura. So again, we discussed it last time how Prabhupada explains a temple like this, which is where deities are worshipped according to the proper standard, then that is directly also a dham, where everything is meant for the pleasure of Shri Shri Radha Gopinath here. And worshipping the deity itself, that goes in that case together with faith and veneration. So text 129. These 5 limbs of devotional service are the best of all. Even a slight performance of these 5 awakens love for Krishna. And so even a slight performance of these 5 awakens love for Krishna. So it's also encouragement for us, obviously, similar like Krishna says, Nihabhakraminashvasti pratyavayona vidyate, that whatever little endeavor we do in devotional service, it will never get lost. And similarly here, Mahaprabhu is explaining that love of God, that it will awaken definitely by whatever little we do. Of course, time may separate, because we have, as was mentioned before, we have to surrender to Krishna in all respects, so whatever we hold back, then it gets delayed by that. But it's also inspiration for preaching and outreach, that even if somehow other person gets in contact and gets to do one tiny bit of that, his path has started, and he will, it's only a question of time that he will get love of God, that he will come to full pure devotional service. So text 130. One should have full faith and love in worshipping the lotus feet of the deity. So Prabhupada is explaining, these are quoted from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the next 2 verses as well. So we'll continue. Text 131. One should taste the meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of pure devotees, and one should associate with the devotees who are more advanced than oneself and endowed with a similar type of affection for the Lord. So that's similar to Kapiladev's famous verse, which we heard earlier, Satam Prasangam Mama Virya Samvido, that the meaning of Srimad Bhagavatam, as Mahaprabhu is explaining here, quoting from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, can be really tasted only in the association of pure devotees. Because otherwise, one purport Prabhupada explains that even reading the right books, what to speak of reading books with commentaries from Mayavadis or from other non-devotees, even if you read the Prabhupada's books, he doesn't say specifically Prabhupada's books, but if you read Shastra, because if you read Prabhupada's books, you are getting association of Prabhupada, and you're getting his protection of telling us how to not get misguided and how to get the proper understanding. But still, it's better also in that case to do it in association of devotees. But otherwise, even if you read Shastra, the proper bhakti devotional literatures even, you may still come to an impersonal understanding, actually, to at least tendencies in your dealings with the Lord. You won't be able to really deal on a very personal level with the Lord unless you are in the association of pure devotees. And thus you won't be able to really taste the meaning of Bhagavatam, because after all, this Abhideya process of devotional service is all about fully redeveloping our personal relationship between the Lord and ourselves. So, who are more, and one should associate with the devotees who are more advanced than oneself and endowed with a similar type of affection for the Lord. So, obviously, if we don't associate with devotees who are more advanced, then it's difficult also to get inspired to improve our devotional service. And so that's one level, that simply looking at devotees who are more advanced inspires us and instills a desire to also become like them. And also, if we are with them, we'll also get opportunity to serve them, and then we'll, by their blessings, we'll also naturally be able to advance more. And the other point here is endowed with a similar type of affection for the Lord. So that's also interesting, because even in Krishna consciousness, like there's so many temples throughout the world, for example, but okay, that's then another level. But let's first on the level of, like Prabhupada would emphasize also several times, how even though we understand and have great awe and reverence also for all the other incarnations of Krishna, all his expansions, and we read about them in Srimad Bhagavatam and glorify them as well, but still the highest goal is that we want to be devotees of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. That's particularly what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his Sena Patibhakta, Srila Prabhupada want to give us, the highest ecstatic love of Krishna himself, rather than in awe and reverence some other expansion of him. So, and for that, obviously, if you associate with other devotees who have attached to another form of the Lord and thus in a different mood, then that might be rather disturbing, and you might even sway from your determination, or you won't get the full inspiration as you would if you associate with like-minded devotees. And even then between, that's the other level I wanted to mention, even between Radha and Krishna, then there's many different temples with many different deities throughout the world, and even there it actually Prabhupada expressed some few times that we should be attached to one particular deity, even between Radha and Krishna. Only then, again, coming back to the point of personalism, only then we can be really personal. Because otherwise, it's still kind of, okay, we understand they're all Radha and Krishna, but to be really dedicated to them, you would need to be to one particular form. At least, there might be exceptions for who are really traveling a lot and preaching, but still, because then you feel, naturally more obliged in a positive sense, and you'll be able to give your heart fully. Like, you still, of course, appreciate all the other forms as well, and you'll also have affection for them. But like for us, it's Sri Sri Radha Gopinath, whom we understand as being particularly, it's them who are maintaining us and who are inspiring us, and who are showering their love upon us. So, so it's a really great blessing to be able to be in such association of devotees then who have this similar understanding and feeling and affection for the Lord, and in that way it's very easy to go deeper and deeper in that. So, text 132, one should congregationally chant the holy name of the Lord and reside in Vrindavan. So, similarly continuing that chanting the holy name other than, japa, is then kirtan, especially that sankirtan that we should do. And even in japa, obviously, it's also, if possible, best if you come to the temple here and chant in association with devotees, and that the place itself is like surcharged spiritually, as everyone who comes here can confirm, and so it makes it much easier and more powerful, the chanting also. Even the japa, what to speak of kirtan, and of or sankirtan, even in the form of going on Harinam or book distribution and everything. So all of that is always much easier and more powerful than association of devotees. And residing in Vrindavan again, here the temple is also non-different from Vrindavan. It's only very few devotees who would for whom it's really best and suitable to reside in Vrindavan and Vrindavan. How do you say? Vrindavan? No, there's a Bhumi. I forgot the word now. Anyway, okay. So text 133. The power of these 5 principles is very wonderful and difficult to reconcile. Even without faith in them, a person who is offenseless can experience dormant love of Krishna simply by being a little connected with them. So, yeah, again, Mahaprabhu is stressing here on this point of this superior power of especially these 5 principles that we are discussing here. And he's saying it's so wonderful that it's difficult to reconcile. So, in other words, with our materially contaminated mind, we can't actually conceive how great it is and how much benefit we do derive by engaging in those 5. And that from that we can also then further conclude we can never conceive of how grateful we actually should be, how indebted we are to Srila Prabhupada, to our spiritual masters and all the other devotees who are helping us and inspiring us, and to obviously Panchatattva and Shri Shri Radha Gopinath. Because, we can't, in our wildest imagination, we can't actually come to really have an idea of how merciful, particularly these 5 items are in devotional service. And Mahaprabhu is explaining here that, so even without faith in them, so you might, because you're not able to really understand, but somehow or other you, maybe because simply by you have a friendship with some devotee, and just because of that you also try to follow. Even you might not be convinced yourself, you might not even have faith in them, as it's explained here. But as long as you're offenseless, so if you don't criticize and don't think, well, how can it be so? It's like similar as what was his name? Gopal Chapal? No. When Haridas Thakur was glorifying the holy name upon the request of other devotees in an assembly, and there was one Brahmana who could not take this point that simply by a slight trace of the holy name, slight awakening of the chanting of the holy name, then you're automatically liberated from millions of births that we have been entangled here. And so then he challenges Haridas Thakur, blasphemes him, and then he obviously had to face the consequences. He got even leprosy, right? So, but eventually then Mahaprabhu delivered him. But so as long as we are offenseless, that we don't, that we understand that we are not really able to understand the greatness of devotional service, of these 5 items in particular, but we somehow still we take it up, and then we can get this benefit of experiencing dormant love of Krishna simply by being a little connected with them, Mahaprabhu is saying here. So then text 134. When one is firmly fixed in devotional service, whether he executes one or many processes of devotional service, the waves of love of Godhead will awaken. So, similar Prabhupada would explain that, otherwise we hear about those 9 limbs of devotional service that Prahlad Maharaj is listing, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, and so forth. But even even one of them can take you back to God. It can make your life perfect. And there's different examples of those who have attained perfection by doing one of them, like Parikshit Maharaj through Shravanam and Sukadeva Goswami Kirtanam, Prahlad Maharaj Smaranam, and so forth. And so, similarly, especially with these 5 items, also the waves of love of God that will awaken. Mahaprabhu explains here. So, I forgot my flask. Can you bring it, please? So, text 135. There are many devotees who execute only one of the 9 processes of devotional service. Nonetheless, they get ultimate success. Devotees like Maharaj Ambarish execute all 9 items and they also got ultimate success. So, yeah, Ambarish Maharaj, we know, is the famous example of how to engage all the different senses in the Lord's service. And does he quote it here? No. No, after that now he does... Yes, so he does quote what we just said about the different personalities as examples of attaining perfection is in one of them, and then he will quote Maharaj Ambarish. So I'll just continue reading then. So text 136, which is a quotation from Srimad Bhagavatam. Oh no, sorry, not Srimad Bhagavatam, from Padyavali 53 and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1-265. So Maharaj Parikshit attained the highest perfection sheltered at Lord Krishna's lotus feet simply by hearing about Lord Vishnu. Shukadeva Goswami attained perfection simply by reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj attained perfection by remembering the Lord. The goddess of fortune attained perfection by massaging the transcendental legs of Mahavishnu. Maharaj Prithu attained perfection by worshipping the deity, and Akrura attained perfection by offering prayers unto the Lord. Vajrangaji Hanuman attained perfection by rendering service to Lord Ramachandra, and Arjuna attained perfection simply by being Krishna's friend. Bali Maharaj attained perfection by dedicating everything to the lotus feet of Krishna. But it is still interesting to note also that even though, yes, they are glorified as having attained perfection in these particular limbs of devotional service, but we can see that, as many times it would be emphasized, how Shravanam is the beginning and is the most important item out of these. Like, starting with Maharaj Parikshit, he's the example of Shravanam, sorry, but Srikadeva Goswami, we know the pastime for him is also that only upon hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, then he was from a Brahmavadi, then he would became a pure devotee. Obviously it's a pastime. He's a parrot, eternal servant of Srimati Radharani in the spiritual world. But then Prahlad Maharaj, for example, he was, even while still being in the womb of Kayadu, of his mother, he was hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from Narad Muni. And yeah, goddess of fortune, it's also mentioned that herself and Lord Vishnu, that they continuously recite Srimad Bhagavatam to each other. So chanting and hearing is always there. Prithu Maharaj, by worshipping the deity, but he also in Bhagavatam itself, we hear how he heard from the 4 Kumaras, for example, how they came there, and he very humbly, very gratefully sat at the lotus feet and heard from them their instructions. And Akrura attained perfection by offering prayers unto the Lord. Yeah, I can't remember a particular pastime of Akrura, how he was hearing, but then Hanuman, obviously he always chants and hears the glories of Lord Ramachandra as well, even though the example is here for Dasya, for serving. And Arjuna, simply by being Krishna's friend. Bhagavad Gita itself was spoken to him, for example, so he also is engaged in hearing. And Bali Maharaj, by dedicating everything to the lotus feet of Krishna, so that's for Atma Nivedanam. But yeah, even I can't remember a particular pastime of Bali Maharaj of hearing, but yeah, so And now Mahaprabhu is quoting of the verses about describing how Maharaj Ambarish is engaging all his senses in the Lord's service. So that's Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 4, Texts 18 to 20. So Maharaj Ambarish always engaged his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. His words in describing the spiritual world and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his hands in cleansing and washing the Lord's temple, his ears in hearing topics about the Supreme Lord, his eyes in seeing the deity of Lord Krishna in the temple, his body in touching the lotus feet of Vaishnavas and embracing them, his nostrils in smelling the aroma of the tulsi leaves offered to Krishna's lotus feet, his tongue in tasting food offered to Krishna, his legs in going to places of pilgrimage like Vrindavan and Mathura, or to the Lord's temple, and his head in touching the lotus feet of the Lord and offering him prayers. Thus Maharaj Ambarish desired only to serve the Lord faithfully. In this way he engaged his senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he awakened his dormant loving propensity for the Lord's service. So, in these famous verses we hear how, again, when we are in the temple, especially at non-COVID times, then we are able to do all of these and then like desiring everything for the Lord. We can see that also as if you engage all your gross senses, as it's described before that, and also your mind obviously, but because it's always, subtle level is always more powerful, more difficult to do. So if you, at the beginning, that's why I said when we come to devotional service, then what you do is very important, and then later how you do it becomes more important, because first we simply have to start to engage in devotional service, to engage our senses, and then by that we will get purified gradually, and then we'll be able to, our mind will more naturally be Krishna conscious, our consciousness, and then our subtle senses will always be more and more fixed upon the lotus feet of the Lord. And then by that, then we'll be able to really deeply then desire for the Lord, rather than trying to enjoy separate from Him and having to put so much extraneous endeavors to externally at least engage in devotional service. Then it becomes more towards then Raganuga, from where it becomes spontaneous to serve the Lord. And then continuing text 140, if a person gives up all material desires and completely engages in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, as enjoined in revealed scriptures, he is never indebted to demigods, sages or forefathers. So Mahaprabhu now gives the reassurance of, okay, we understand, you heard just the glories about how you get love of Godhead by engaging all your senses in devotional service, or by fully dedicating yourself to even one of those 9 items. But one might still have doubt that, but what about all my other material duties and my indebtedness to demigods, sages, forefathers, family, everyone? So that's why now Mahaprabhu is then quoting in the next text another famous verse from, it's not mentioned here. Here in the previous purport. So from 11th canto, 5th chapter, text 41. That's Devashi Bhutaptaninam Pitrinam. So one who has given up all material duties and taken full shelter at the lotus feet of Mukunda, who gives shelter to all, is not indebted to the demigods, great sages, ordinary living beings, relatives, friends, mankind, or even one's forefathers who have passed away. And so which makes it very clear that as especially when we come to devotional service, that's quite important for us that we are able to actually give our heart fully, that we have this conviction that simply by engaging in devotional service, then I don't need to really worry much about my other friends and family and everyone, because they get the highest benefit by, if I at least engage in devotional service, so to speak, if at some point I would be able to influence them also. But the Lord is so pleased, so grateful for our devotional service that He takes care of our relatives also, of like many generations even. And similarly, of course, I mean, in Kali Yuga we don't have that understanding anyway of our indebtedness to the demigods and the forefathers and sages. Well, yeah, what to speak of sages? Of like, obviously we know for sages, for example, why are people supposed to know that they actually indebted to the sages? Because they give us all the wisdom, they give us all the scriptures, and the demigods, obviously, we know, they provide all the, like Prabhupada would explain, the lighting, heating, and watering of the universe. It's all done by the demigods. And so obviously we are indebted to them, but then we know, maybe he's quoting that soon, I can't see it here. Yata tata mula nishechanena tripyanta tatskanda pucho pashaka pranoparahat yachayatendriyanam tataiva sarvar haranam achatecha. Yeah. So as Narad Muni in a famous verse explains that a devotee understands that Krishna is just right like the root, that by watering the root the whole tree is nourished, or by feeding the belly the whole body is nourished, and similarly by worshipping Krishna all the other demigods and everyone else is also pleased and nourished. And yeah, so a devotee understands that, and therefore we are not ungrateful. Like I think recently we heard also about dealing with the demigods, that we are not disrespectful to demigods. We are also grateful to them for their service, but we understand that Krishna is more pleased if we directly worship him and not do it avidipurvakam, of indirect worshipping through the demigods. And they themselves are actually also more pleased. Especially we see that with very elevated ones like Lord Shiva, when he appeared to the Prachetas because he was so pleased of seeing that they had the intention of worshipping the Lord. They had a very pure heart, even though coming upon the order of their father Prachina Parishad to simply do the pasya, to actually get the power then to be proper kings and beget good children, all of that. But Lord Shiva saw that they were very pure-hearted and innocent, and so he came to them and he said to them actually that I'm very pleased because I can see that you want to worship the Supreme Lord. And therefore he, as being the greatest demigod, but he came there and instructed them in the Rudra Gita, and through which they attained perfection, so that the Lord then eventually appeared personally to them and blessed them profusely. So continuing text 142. Although the pure devotee does not follow all the regulative principles of an ashrama, he worships the lotus feet of Krishna. Therefore he naturally has no tendency to commit sin. So, no, he's not quoting it here, but that reflects also one famous verse of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, obviously, that because, as we just discussed, a pure devotee, by worshipping Krishna, then everything is perfect. You have no other duties, and that's why you don't even need to follow all the regulative principles of an ashrama dharma, as Mahaprabhu is explaining here. But by doing that, by engaging in devotional service, you become purified, and actually, generally, you won't commit any sins, because the tendency to commit sins itself will go away. But as Krishna explains, that even accidentally, if you would do, then Krishna excuses, and because you will very quickly become purified and continue being fixed in your devotional services, as he explains in 9th chapter. Apichet sudara chara bhajade mamananyapak sadureva samantiviha samyak vyavyasato hisaha. That even if you do commit the most abominable action, if you're fixed in devotional service, you're still to be considered a sadhu, a saintly person, because you're rightly situated in this devotional service. So, text 143. If forever a devotee accidentally becomes involved in a sinful activity, Krishna purifies him. He does not have to undergo the regulated form of atonement. So, we just discussed that because being engaged in devotional service means being in direct contact with Krishna, with Shri Shri Radha Gopinath, and that itself is far superior to any other form of atonement, like discussed recently from the 6th canto, how it starts off with Maharaj Parikshit and discussing with Shukadeva Goswami about Prayaschitta, because having heard about the hellish planets at the end of 5th canto, Maharaj Parikshit shows his concern, so what can be done about it to avoid this suffering. Then first Shukadeva Goswami tests and proposes Prayaschitta on a Karmakanda level, and then when Maharaj Parikshit rejects that as being Kunchara Sochavat, just like bathing of an elephant, then Shukadeva Goswami gives him the Jnanakanda level of the simple by cultivating transcendental knowledge, understanding that you are not the body, and that therefore not to engage in sinful activities and trying to satisfy your senses. In that way you become free, and then Maharaj Parikshit still rejects it, because it still doesn't go to the very root of our envy of Krishna, being our wanting to ensure separate from him, and therefore our lack of engaging in our constitutional position in devotional service. And therefore, so that's, and then obviously Shukadeva Goswami goes on glorifying that and gives then the famous example of Achamil then, which goes for 3 chapters. So, also in Bhagavatam there's a famous verse for that, of how the Krishna is the one purifying us in our heart, that Punya Shravana Kirtana Shinvatam Sakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Ridyantastu Apadrani Vidunati Suritsatam. So that, which is part of the famous glorification of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam itself, because again, hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is direct association with Krishna, and Krishna is pleased by that. Actually, he is always situated in our heart already as a super soul, and he's always looking for when will he turn again to me, and looking for an excuse to then become active in our heart, not just being there situated as the neutral witness, the overseer and permitter, but to manifest us as Bhagavan, and to purify our heart, as it's mentioned there, Vidunoti Suritsatam, so of the truthful devotee, the Lord purifies our heart, because He's already there, as Prabhupada, I think that's in the pastime of cleansing of the Gundicha temple, how then there's a nice explanation of the Acharyas, which Prabhupada is explaining how to apply those teachings of what we can see when all the devotees, how eagerly they are cleaning along with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then, in those purports, Prabhupada is quoting this verse also and explaining nicely that, Krishna, he wants to do it. It's very, he says, obviously Krishna is omnipotent, so anything is easy for him to do with his unlimited, inconceivable energies. But Krishna, Prabhupada explains there that because he's already there in the heart, so it's very easy for him to clean it. So he just looks for an excuse. Oh, he's hearing about me, so let me do something. So like that. So, text 144. One who has given up everything and taken full shelter at the lotus feet of Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is very dear to Krishna. If he is involved in some sinful activity by accident, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated within everyone's heart, removes his sins without difficulty. And that was another quotation from 11th Canto, 5th chapter, text 42. So that would have, okay. yeah, on the same point that without difficulty, Krishna can remove all our sins in one stroke. Aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayami mashachaha. So, text 145. The path of speculative knowledge and renunciation is not very essential for devotional service. Indeed, good qualities such as non-violence and mind and sense control automatically accompany a devotee of Lord Krishna. So obviously that's also in that beginning section of Bhagavatam, among those famous verses, explained how the relation of devotion services with knowledge and renunciation. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayochitaha Chanatya Shivairakhyam Jnanam Chayata Haitukam. Yeah, where it's explained that one who engages in devotional service to Lord Vasudeva, to Krishna, for him then knowledge and renunciation automatically are developed as a byproduct. So, but still, of course, especially at the beginning, transcendental knowledge is very important, as Krishna would stress also in Bhagavad Gita a lot. So my throat bad. So, but we don't see it separate from devotional service. It's also part of our devotional service to read Srila Prabhupada's books, to hear and try to understand better and take inspiration and determination to then engage in practical devotional service as well, more and more, and in chanting and hearing. So, and the other point Mahaprabhu is making here, that indeed good qualities such as non-violence and mind and sense control automatically accompany a devotee of the Lord. So not only knowledge and renunciation, but also all the good qualities, they come automatically. Like Krishna also explains in 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, in the second half of that, he lists many different qualities which make one very dear to Krishna, and then he concludes with, but supreme among all of them is to, with full faith and love, worship Him. And by doing that, then because by doing that automatically all the other good qualities will also awaken. And and for example, because good qualities of a devotee, what's really significant about it is that it's an awakening. It's not on some superficial platform to have some qualities temporarily, as it would be for non-devotees, and that's why Prahlad Maharaj would explain, for example, in the 5th canto, in his prayers that he offers in Harivasha, as they are given the different prayers of the living entities there in the 5th canto. In the famous verse, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati kinchana sarvaina gunastatra samasate suraha haro bhaktasya kuto mahatkuna manoratena asati davato bhaye. That if you don't, first two lines where he says that one who is engaged in devotional service, he has all the good qualities, and so all the good qualities and all the demigods, they reside in him. But what about non-devotees? Harau apaktasya kuto mahatkuna. Those who are not devotees of Lord Hari, kuto mahatkuna. Where can there be really good qualities? And then he explains in the last line why. Because you might still say, well, we see some good qualities in non-devotees also, but then I just try to explain that you can't really take it seriously, because we discussed a bit in the morning also, that as a non-devotee, you're simply under the free modes of material nature, and that's always changing. As long as you don't start to engage in devotional service, you're not able to transcend it. There's no possibilities. You're simply one time, might be a bit more in goodness, but then very easily, very quickly, you'll slide down to passion and ignorance. And along with that, your so-called qualities, because it's not your real qualities. The real qualities are that of our being as spirit soul, as eternal servants of Krishna, which we naturally have eternally. But that's why we have to awaken them. In other words, remove our false coverings. And And so, coming back to Prahlad Maharaj is concluding that, so for non-devotees, how are their so-called good qualities? They're simply manorate nasati. So they're simply in the chariot of our mind, they're simply mental concoction, simply on the mental platform. We might have, for some time, have some determination, okay, I want to be a vegetarian, or I want to be very nice to all the people in some way or other. But yeah, it's simply temporary in the asati, on the asati platform of the temporary world, davatobahi, on the external platform you're running. So text 146. For one who is fully engaged in my devotional service, whose mind is fixed on me in bhakti yoga, the path of speculative knowledge and renunciation is not very beneficial. So, yeah, Prabhupada would explain sometimes that yes, there's some value to speculate the path of speculative knowledge and any form of renunciation, because little purification on a more gross level is there, and then you might, if you have the luck to get association with the devotees, then more easily you might be able to take up devotional service. But devotional service is not dependent on that, and so Mahaprabhu is explaining here that for one who is fully engaged in my devotional service, then there's no use of these. Then, as we just discussed, it becomes a real renunciation, and real knowledge comes as a byproduct. So, text 147. So that's a quotation from the Skanda Purana. O Hunter, good qualities like non-violence which you have developed are not very astonishing, for those who are engaged in the Lord's devotional service are never inclined to give pain to others because of envy. So I would guess that might be someone like Narad Muni or Angir Rishi, or who is his friend? No, Pavat Muni. Telling that to Mrigari when they see how he had completely changed from having been not just a hunter, ordinary hunter, but his profession, we know, was, also in CC itself we hear that did we hear it already, or does it come? No, it comes, I think, after when the Sanatana Goswami is requesting the Lord to explain the Atmaram verse again. Then at the end of that, he gives the pastime of Mrigari also. So we know that he was even so violent to take pleasure in seeing the animals suffering that he only half killed them. And then by Narad Muni's mercy, by his influence, he became a pure devotee, of which then non-violence was one byproduct. We know that when he saw them descending, those two sages, he immediately wanted to pay his respects, pay dandavat, but then he didn't immediately fall flat on the floor, but he first gently put aside the ants on the ground, so not to hurt them. And when the sages saw that, then they spoke like that. I'm not completely sure if that's one of those verses, but it would sound like that. Because Bharat Muni, he's then seeing that because after that, when they get then the reception of Mrigari, when he washes the lotus feet and then puts the water on his head and on that of his wife, then he dances in an ecstatic love and chanting and dancing. So that is the more real obvious manifestation of the full mercy, developing love of God, and that non-violence is simply a natural byproduct, is one of the qualities of a devotee, which we hear here. So text 148. My dear Sanatana, I have now in detail described devotional service according to the regulative principles. Now hear from me about spontaneous devotional service and its characteristics. So, This means finally now we concluded about sadhana bhakti, the description that Mahaprabhu gave you, or Vaidhi bhakti, following the regulative principles, and thus gradually become purified and gradually reawaken our dormant love of Krishna. So, I think we're pretty much on time now. Then we'll leave Raganuga Bhakti to continue next time, next Thursday. Okay. Any question or comment? Yes, bro.
Grigori was very careful, when he was trying to pay obeisances, but he don't want to hurt the
ants.
ants.
Yeah.